What I'm about to reveal could change the way you look at food for the rest of your life. And it may explain why so many adults over 60 suddenly begin losing strength in their legs without ever understanding why it's happening. Right now, there are three common foods sitting in kitchens all across America. Foods that look harmless. Foods that even seem healthy. Foods that millions of older adults eat every single week without a second thought. But after the age of 65, these foods can begin doing something dangerous inside the body. Quietly, slowly, silently. Not with sudden pain, not with a dramatic warning sign, but with gradual damage that weakens the muscles, reduces circulation, dulls balance, and slowly steals away the confidence you once had in your own steps. One day the stairs feel harder. Your legs feel heavier. You reach for the wall without even realizing it. And most people simply say, well, I guess that's just aging. But what if it isn't? What if some of that weakness is being created at the dinner table every single day? I'm Dr. Richard Ben, and in today's video, I'm going to show you 3 foods that may be quietly damaging your legs and balance after 65. But more importantly, I'll also show you 3 powerful foods that can help support circulation, muscle strength, nerve function, and stability as you age. Now, I know you've probably heard health advice your entire life. Eat your vegetables, avoid too much sugar, walk more, sleep better, and yes, those things matter. But here's the part that most people are never told. After 65, your body no longer responds to food the same way it did when you were younger. A food that seemed harmless at 40 can become inflammatory at 70. A meal your body handled easily years ago may now be quietly affecting your blood vessels, your nerves, even the tiny balance signals between your feet and your brain. And the frightening part is that this damage often happens without obvious symptoms in the beginning, because loss of strength rarely arrives all at once. It happens gradually. A little less stability this year. A little more stiffness next year. A little more fear every time you step off a curb or walk across a slippery floor. And eventually, the risk becomes very real. Falls are now one of the leading causes of serious injury and loss of independence in older adults. Not because people suddenly become weak overnight, but because the body has often been struggling silently for years before anyone notices. That's why this conversation matters so much. And I want you to stay with me until the end of this video, because one of the foods I'm about to reveal is something that almost every senior believes is healthy. In fact, many people eat it every single day, thinking they're helping their body, while it may actually be leaving them nutritionally weaker over time. And the final food on this list? It might be the exact salad ingredient sitting in your refrigerator right now. Let's start with one of the most powerful foods for aging legs that almost nobody talks about enough: beets. Now, I know what some of you are thinking already. Beets? Really? But stay with me for a moment, because what beets do inside the body after the age of 65 is honestly remarkable. One of the biggest hidden problems in older adults is poor circulation, and the scary part is that it often develops so slowly that people mistake it for normal aging. Your legs feel heavier than they used to. Your feet get colder at night. You stand up and feel slightly unsteady for a few seconds. Walking long distances suddenly feels exhausting. And over time, many people begin losing confidence in their own balance without understanding what's really happening underneath the surface. Here's the truth. As we age, our blood vessels naturally become narrower and stiffer. That means oxygen and nutrients have a harder time reaching the lower parts of the body, especially the feet and legs. Think of your blood vessels like a garden hose. When the hose is wide open and flexible, water flows smoothly and reaches every corner of the garden. But when that hose becomes stiff and narrow, pressure drops. The areas furthest away begin drying out first. That's exactly what happens inside the aging body. And the parts furthest from the heart are your feet and lower legs. This is where beets become incredibly important. Beets are naturally rich in compounds called nitrates. Once you eat them, your body converts those nitrates into something called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide acts almost like a signal to your blood vessels, telling them to relax and open wider. Wider blood vessels mean better circulation. Better circulation means more oxygen reaching your muscles, your nerves, and the tiny stabilizing systems in your legs that help keep you balanced while walking. And when blood flow improves, something amazing begins to happen. Your steps feel lighter. Your muscles fatigue less quickly. Your feet feel warmer and more responsive. Even your balance can improve because the nerves in your feet are finally receiving the oxygen and nutrients they desperately need. I once spoke with a man in his 70s who told me he thought he was simply getting old. Every walk left him exhausted. His legs felt heavy halfway through the grocery store. Sometimes he even felt numbness in his toes at night. But after making small changes to support circulation, including adding beets to his weekly meals, he noticed something surprising within a few weeks. He said, "I don't feel as tired when I walk anymore." Not cured overnight. Not transformed magically. Just steadier, stronger, more confident. That's how the body often heals, quietly. Now, you do not need to force yourself to eat huge amounts of beets every day. Small, consistent habits matter far more. You can roast them in the oven with olive oil, slice them cold into a salad, or blend a small beet into a smoothie with berries and fresh ginger. The sweetness of the berries softens the flavor beautifully. And I want you to remember something important as we continue through this video. Because this issue of blood flow, it's going to come back again later. But when we get to the dangerous foods older adults should avoid, you'll see how some common foods are quietly damaging the exact circulation your legs depend on most. The second food that can quietly help protect your legs as you age is sweet potatoes. And this is where many people get confused. Because most older adults hear the word potato and immediately assume all potatoes affect the body the same way. But they do not. In fact, after the age of 65, sweet potatoes can be dramatically more supportive for your balance, nerve health, and long-term mobility than many common starchy foods people eat every day. Here's why that matters so much. One of the hidden dangers of aging is the gradual loss of communication between your feet and your brain. Now, that may sound strange at first, but think about how your body stays balanced while walking. Every single step depends on tiny nerve signals traveling from the bottom of your feet up to your brain in real time. Flat surface. Uneven ground. Step too far left. Adjust posture. Slow down. Those signals happen automatically thousands of times every day. But over time, unstable blood sugar can slowly damage the small blood vessels and delicate nerves responsible for carrying those signals. And when those signals weaken, balance begins to weaken too. Not suddenly, quietly. At first, you may simply feel less steady walking downstairs. Then you begin catching your foot on rugs more often. You misjudge curbs. You feel unsure stepping onto wet pavement. And many older adults describe a strange feeling that's difficult to explain. My feet just don't feel connected anymore. That sentence tells me a lot. Because in many cases, the problem is not muscle weakness alone. The problem is that the body's internal communication system is struggling. This is exactly where sweet potatoes become so valuable. Sweet potatoes have a lower glycemic index than regular white potatoes. That means they release glucose slowly into the bloodstream instead of causing sharp spikes and crashes in blood sugar. And those spikes matter more than most people realize. Every major blood sugar surge creates stress inside the small blood vessels that nourish the nerves in your feet and legs. Think of those nerves like electrical wires. When the protective layer around those wires gets damaged little by little over the years, the signals begin flickering. Some messages arrive late. Some become weaker. Some stop arriving altogether. And when your brain cannot accurately sense where your feet are, your risk of falling rises dramatically. That's why protecting nerve health is just as important as protecting muscle strength. Sweet potatoes help by providing steadier energy and reducing the stress unstable blood sugar places on those nerves. They're also rich in potassium, magnesium, fiber, and beta-carotene, all nutrients that aging muscles and nerves rely on heavily. Potassium supports muscle contractions. Magnesium helps maintain proper nerve signaling and may reduce nighttime leg cramps. And fiber slows digestion even further, helping blood sugar remain more stable after meals. I once spoke with a man in his early 80s who told me he had stopped taking evening walks because he no longer trusted his footing. Not because he was in severe pain. Not because he had suffered a major injury. He simply felt uncertain. He said, "Sometimes it feels like my feet react half a second too late." That tiny delay can change everything. Because most falls happen in fractions of a second. A missed signal. A delayed adjustment. A foot that doesn't quite land where the brain expected. Sweet potatoes are incredibly simple to include in your routine. You can roast them until soft and naturally sweet. Add them into soups for warmth and texture. Mash them with olive oil and cinnamon. And whenever possible, eat the skin too, because much of the fiber and nutrients are concentrated there. And what I'm about to show you next may surprise you even more. Because the next food is something almost nobody associates with leg strength or balance at all. The third food I want to talk about today is kale, along with other dark leafy greens like spinach and arugula. And I know some people immediately lose interest the moment they hear the word kale. But what I'm about to explain may completely change how you think about these foods, especially after the age of 65. Because kale is not just healthy. It is working on systems inside the body that directly affect whether you stay steady, balanced, and independent as you age. One of the biggest hidden problems in older adults is the gradual stiffening of the arteries. Most people think weak legs are simply about muscles, but very often the real problem begins inside the blood vessels. When arteries become stiff and narrow, circulation to the lower body slowly declines. Less oxygen reaches the muscles. Less nutrition reaches the nerves. Feet become colder. Legs fatigue faster. Balance becomes less reliable. And over time, many older adults begin walking more cautiously without even realizing why. This is where kale becomes incredibly important. Kale is one of the richest natural sources of vitamin K1, a nutrient that plays a major role in where calcium ends up inside your body. Now, that may not sound exciting at first, but stay with me because this matters enormously. As people age, calcium sometimes begins building up in places it does not belong, especially inside the arteries. And when calcium accumulates there, the arteries slowly become harder and less flexible. Think of it like mineral buildup inside old water pipes. Flow becomes restricted. Pressure changes. The system stops working efficiently. Vitamin K helps direct calcium away from the arteries and back toward the bones where it belongs. That means healthier circulation and better blood flow reaching the legs and feet. But kale does something else that most people never hear about. It contains a powerful compound called lutein. Now, many people know lutein helps protect vision, and that's true. But lutein also supports the brain itself, particularly the speed at which the brain processes information. And that matters more for balance than most people realize. Because many falls do not happen because the legs suddenly become too weak to stand. They happen because the brain reacts just slightly too slowly. A tiny wobble occurs. The foot slips a little. The body tries to correct itself. But the signal arrives a fraction of a second too late. And in that tiny window, a fall happens. That's why reaction speed matters so much as we age. I once spoke with a woman in her 70s who told me, "I don't feel weak exactly. I just don't recover quickly when I lose my balance anymore." That sentence stayed with me. Because she was describing something incredibly important. The issue was not simply strength. It was response time. And nutrition plays a major role in protecting that response system. Now, kale can feel tough or bitter if it's prepared the wrong way. But there are simple ways to make it much easier to enjoy. One of the best methods is massaging the leaves gently with olive oil for a minute or two. That softens the fibers and improves both texture and digestion. You can also sauté it lightly with garlic and olive oil. Or blend a handful into a smoothie with berries and banana. Small amounts, consistently over time, can genuinely support the systems your body depends on for stability and movement. And I want to pause here for a moment and speak to you honestly. If you're watching this, chances are you are already trying to take care of yourself. You're making meals at home. You're trying to eat healthier. You're doing your best to stay independent. And that matters. But perhaps nobody has ever explained how closely food is connected to the strength of your legs, the sharpness of your balance, and the confidence you feel when you walk. Now we're about to move into the part that most older adults are almost never warned about. Because some of the foods people trust the most may actually be quietly working against them every single day. Now we need to talk about the foods that may be quietly working against your legs and balance every single day. Even foods that many people consider completely harmless. And the first one is probably sitting in more kitchens than almost any other food on this list. Corn. Now, I want to be very clear before we go any further. Corn is not poison. You do not need to panic if you've eaten it your whole life. But after the age of 65, eating large amounts of corn regularly may contribute to something that quietly accelerates weakness and instability in the body over time. Inflammation. And inflammation is dangerous precisely because you usually cannot feel it happening at first. There is no alarm bell, no sharp pain, no dramatic warning sign. Instead, it works silently in the background, slowly damaging the systems your legs depend on every day. Here's why corn becomes part of the problem. Corn is very high in omega-6 fatty acids. Now, your body does need some omega-6 fats. The issue is balance. Because omega-3 fats help calm inflammation, while excessive omega-6 intake can push the body toward a more inflammatory state. And most older adults are consuming far too much omega-6 without realizing it, especially through processed foods, corn oils, snack foods, and frequent corn-based meals. Over time, chronic inflammation begins affecting the blood vessels that carry oxygen to your legs. It irritates the joints. It stresses the delicate nerves in your feet. And slowly, the body becomes less efficient at maintaining strength, coordination, and balance. Think about it this way. If inflammation is constantly running inside the body like a small fire, eventually, the wiring, the pipes, and the moving parts all begin wearing down faster. That's exactly what happens inside aging legs. The blood vessels stiffen. The joints ache more easily. The nerve signals from the feet become weaker. And once again, the changes happen gradually. You simply notice walking feels harder than it used to. You get tired more quickly in grocery stores. Standing for long periods becomes uncomfortable. You feel slightly less steady every few months. Most people never connect these changes to inflammation because the decline is so slow. I remember speaking with a man in his 70s who told me, "I don't know when it started. I just don't feel as stable anymore." That's how these problems often appear. Quietly. Not overnight, but month by month, year by year. Corn can also create another issue older adults need to pay attention to: blood sugar spikes. Many corn-based foods have a high glycemic impact, meaning they can raise blood sugar quickly. And as we discussed earlier, repeated blood sugar spikes can damage the tiny blood vessels and nerves responsible for balance and foot sensation. Now, this does not mean you can never eat corn again. This is about awareness and moderation. Small choices matter. Instead of building meals around corn regularly, try replacing some of those foods with options that actively support circulation and nerve health. Beets help improve blood flow. Sweet potatoes provide steadier energy and support nerve protection. These foods work with the body instead of quietly stressing it. And what I'm about to show you next may surprise you even more. Because the second food on this list is something many older adults believe is helping their health every single day. The second food that may be quietly weakening your legs after the age of 65 is something many people use almost every single week without concern: canned tomatoes. And this one surprises a lot of people because fresh tomatoes are actually very healthy. They contain antioxidants, vitamin C, potassium, and compounds that support heart health. But canned tomatoes are different. And for older adults, that difference matters more than most people realize. Here's why. Tomatoes are naturally acidic, and because of that acidity, chemicals from the lining inside many cans can slowly leach into the food over time. One of the most concerning of these chemicals is BPA, short for bisphenol A. Now, BPA has been studied for years, because of its connection to inflammation, hormone disruption, and stress inside the cardiovascular system. And after 65, the body becomes much more sensitive to these kinds of hidden stressors. You may not feel the effects immediately. There's no sudden pain, no dramatic reaction, but the damage builds quietly. And this is exactly what makes it dangerous. Inflammation caused by repeated exposure to certain chemicals does not stay in one place. It affects blood vessels. It affects circulation. It affects the delicate nerves in the feet and lower legs. And over time, these systems begin functioning less efficiently. Now add another problem on top of that. Most canned tomato products are extremely high in sodium. Soup bases, pasta sauces, canned diced tomatoes, tomato paste. Many older adults consume far more sodium than they realize because it hides inside foods that seem harmless. And excess sodium creates a serious problem for aging legs. It raises blood pressure. It causes fluid retention. And when fluid builds up in the lower legs, pressure increases inside the small blood vessels responsible for feeding muscles and nerves. Imagine squeezing a garden hose while trying to water a plant. Less water gets through. That's exactly what happens with circulation in swollen, inflamed legs. The muscles receive less oxygen. The nerves receive fewer nutrients. And slowly, walking becomes more difficult. I once spoke with a woman in her late 70s who told me her legs constantly felt tight and heavy by the evening. Not painful exactly, just swollen, tired, unsteady. She assumed it was simply old age. But when she began reducing heavily processed high-sodium foods and paying closer attention to hidden sources of inflammation, she noticed something surprising. Her legs felt lighter. She moved more comfortably. And she stopped waking up with swollen ankles so often. Again, not overnight. Not magically. But gradually. That's how the body often responds when you remove constant stress from the system. And this is what makes the situation so difficult for many older adults. They are cooking at home, making soups, preparing pasta sauce, trying to eat better than fast food. They genuinely believe they are taking excellent care of themselves. And in many ways, they are. But hidden inside those cans may be a quiet source of inflammation and circulatory stress they never knew existed. The good news is that the solution is simple. Whenever possible, choose fresh tomatoes. If you do buy canned products, look for labels that say BPA-free. And choose no salt added versions whenever you can. These small changes reduce unnecessary stress on the blood vessels and help protect the circulation your legs depend on every day. Because after 65, protecting your mobility is no longer just about muscles. It's about circulation, nerve health, inflammation, and the small daily choices that quietly shape how strong and stable your body feels over time. Now we come to the third food on this list. And this may be the most surprising one of all, because millions of older adults believe they are making a very healthy choice when they eat it. In fact, this could be the exact salad sitting in your refrigerator right now. Iceberg lettuce. Now, unlike some of the other foods we discussed, iceberg lettuce is not directly toxic. It's not loaded with harmful chemicals or dangerous fats. The problem is something quieter. And in many ways, even more deceptive. Because iceberg lettuce is mostly water. Almost entirely water. It contains very little of the nutrients aging legs, nerves, arteries, and muscles desperately need. Very little vitamin K. Very little magnesium. Very little folate. Very little lutein. And this creates something researchers sometimes call the nutrient displacement effect. Here's what that means in simple terms. Every meal is an opportunity to feed the body something protective and nourishing. But when a large portion of the diet is filled with foods that provide very little nutritional value, the body slowly begins missing out on the compounds it needs most to stay strong and stable. And the dangerous part is that people often think they are eating extremely healthy while this is happening. I've seen this many times with older adults who proudly tell me, "I eat salad every single day." And honestly, that effort deserves respect. They are trying. They are making intentional choices. But then I ask, what's in the salad? Iceberg lettuce, a few cucumber slices, maybe some low-fat dressing, and that's it. Meanwhile, their body is quietly running low on nutrients that support circulation, muscle function, bone strength, nerve communication, and brain reaction time. Over months and years, those deficiencies begin adding up. Vitamin K is essential for helping calcium stay in the bones instead of accumulating inside arteries. Without enough vitamin K, circulation can gradually worsen. Magnesium helps muscles relax properly and supports nerve signaling. Low magnesium levels are linked to cramps, weakness, fatigue, and poor muscle performance. Folate helps support healthy blood vessels and reduce inflammatory stress inside the body. And lutein, which is found heavily in dark leafy greens, helps protect both the eyes and the brain, especially the processing speed the brain uses to react quickly when balance is challenged. That reaction speed matters enormously as we age. Because many falls do not happen because someone's legs completely give out. They happen because the body reacts just slightly too slowly. A tiny stumble, a delayed correction, a missed step, and suddenly, a serious injury changes everything. I once spoke with a man in his 80s who told me, I thought I was eating healthy for years because I always had salad with dinner. But despite his good intentions, his body was still lacking many of the nutrients older adults need most. That's why this conversation matters. Because eating healthy is not only about eating less, it's about eating smarter. The good news is that the solution is incredibly simple. Replace iceberg lettuce with darker leafy greens whenever possible. Kale, spinach, arugula, mixed dark greens. These foods provide dramatically more vitamin K, magnesium, folate, antioxidants, and protective compounds that support circulation, nerve health, and stability. And you do not need perfection. Even small changes repeated consistently can begin shifting the nutritional foundation your body is working from. Because after 65, the goal is not simply living longer. It's staying strong enough to keep living life on your own terms. Before we finish today, I want to leave you with something important. None of this is about fear. And it is certainly not about perfection. Getting older is hard enough already, without feeling like every meal has become a test you can fail. The truth is, your body changes after 65. That is real. Muscles recover more slowly. Circulation is not always as strong as it once was. Balance becomes more delicate. And sometimes it can feel frustrating when the body no longer responds the way it used to. I understand that. But here is what I also know. After years of speaking with older adults and watching how the human body responds to better care, your body still wants to heal. Even now, even after 70, even after 80. The body has an incredible ability to respond when you begin giving it the support it has been missing. And often, the changes that matter most are not dramatic. They are small, simple, consistent. A better choice at breakfast. A smarter ingredient at dinner. One less inflammatory food. One more nourishing food. That is how strength is rebuilt over time. Not overnight. Not with extreme diets. But through quiet decisions repeated day after day. So let's make this simple. If you want to support stronger legs, steadier balance, and better circulation as you age, focus on adding more foods that truly nourish the body. Beets can help improve blood flow and support the tiny blood vessels your legs depend on. Sweet potatoes help stabilize blood sugar and protect the nerves responsible for balance and foot sensation. Dark leafy greens like kale, spinach, and arugula provide vitamin K, magnesium, folate, and lutein, nutrients that support circulation, muscle function, and even the brain's ability to react quickly when balance is challenged. At the same time, try reducing the foods that quietly work against those systems. Cut back on excessive corn and highly processed foods rich in inflammatory omega-6 oils. Be careful with canned products loaded with sodium and unnecessary chemical exposure. and replace iceberg lettuce with darker greens that actually provide meaningful nutrition for the aging body. Remember, this is not about never enjoying food again. It is about understanding what your body needs most now. Because the goal is not simply to live longer. The goal is to keep walking confidently, to keep standing steadily, to keep doing the small daily things that allow you to remain independent and connected to the people you love. I know some mornings your body may feel different than it did years ago. I know there are days when the stairs feel steeper, when balance feels less certain, when energy feels harder to find. But please do not assume your best years of strength are automatically behind you. Small changes still matter. Your next meal matters. Your next choice matters. And your body is listening to those choices every single day. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this video helped you, or if you know someone over 60 who needs to hear this message, please share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe for more honest, practical health information designed to help you stay strong, steady, and independent as you age. Take care of yourself. And I'll see you in the next video.